but I was just thinking about how we had some really colorful moments this week. I was curious, how often has it happened with you that you would have a witness driving around and vaping during the deposition?
Well, in my cases, I can't say that would be out of the realm. I've done more than one tweaky interview. I've gotta just put that out there. But no, that was so epic. I mean, wow, what a way to just show the jury how done you are with all of this bullshit.
Well, and I thought it was just so classic and hilarious because, look, I mean, this, as we know, this is very serious for the people involved. And I think it's a serious issue in society and everything. But also, as with any celebrity case, there's a certain amount of, I remember this from the OJ trial. There's a certain amount of kind of ridiculousness, aspect to it as well. That's kind of a spectacle. And I think it's just interesting, sort of that moment of being reminded oh yeah, there's this normal world where people don't have all this time to take out of their lives for a trial. Like, this guy's making deliveries. He's got shit to do, or whatever. Anyway.
And Elaine, what the fuck are you doing with this bullshit? Why are you wasting all of our time with more of this nonsense?
No, you're right. He perfectly voiced the attitude, the feeling that a lot of us have about this. I found the interview with Christian Carino interesting. I liked his, I'll try to put a picture up here, but I liked his look with the hat, and then he had the mirrors everywhere. It's like, but anyway, that seemed like at times, though, it got repetitive with his cross-examination. But he laid out I thought that direct laid out a pretty good case for the idea that Johnny Depp had lost work based on these allegations, right? Do you think I guess my question is, do you think they're proving that? Are they doing a good job with the damages part?
I mean, they have set the stage. They haven't, of course, gone into a lot of those details. He does have expert, business valuation, basically witnesses on his list that we are assuming that's specifically what they're there for, is to talk about what he was earning before she made these allegations, what she was earning after that. What he was earning after that. And so Christian Carino's testimony is really to help establish that causal link, that no, this wasn't a remarkable coincidence. No, it wasn't just because he was getting bad press in general. It was very specifically because of this op-ed.
Exactly. And he was also able to testify to the fact that Amber Heard it was her idea to break the TRO, the restraining order, and meet up in San Francisco, and that she was obviously not afraid of this man if she was pushing to break the restraining order. And so I thought that was interesting as well.
That's one of those subjects that I'm sure there's controversy out there about it, in the commentary. I haven't seen it. My feeds have been a little full lately, but just a lot of dispute, because again, anybody who has done this work can tell you, super, super common for folks in DV relationships to break the restraining order.
Right.
And a lot of that is because this is not the case in Amber's situation, but in a lot of cases when there has been a DV arrest, there's essentially automatically going to be a no contact order put in place by the court as soon as charges are filed. So it's not even something that people are necessarily seeking out. And so under those circumstances, yeah, it's common. The abuse hasn't really been worked out in terms of how people are going to go forward with this relationship or not. So I'm expecting there's probably been a lot of commentary out there about how breaking the restraining order doesn't prove, what the abuse and all that type of thing. But I do think that's missing a really important point in this case, which is the fact that she had sought the restraining order, not a situation where a court imposed it on her without her asking or against her will. And the fact that Johnny had, clearly gone to some measures to cut off contact with her. It's not he's showing up, he's having his friends call her, he's calling her from the jail, more normal patterns that I'm used to seeing. And eventually she relents and gives in. This is her deliberately seeking him back out after he had cut off the contact. And so I think people are capable of seeing that and recognizing the difference.
I appreciate you acknowledging that or saying that about it being a common behavior in these situations, and that brings up something that I've been thinking about a lot. So that one of the guests on Legal Bites this week, and I don't remember who it was, but he admitted that he was not very well versed in this case or whatever. But he seems to be a proponent of the idea of coercive control. And anyway, the point that he was making is that he said he was somewhat uncomfortable with how some behaviors of Amber Heard's, there were some reported behaviors of hers that could be actually the legitimate result of living under the coercive control of an abusive man. We're being basically recast as her being abusive. And he also said that he said that he had worked with a lot of domestic violence victims, and that they do not generally fit the mold the stereotype that we have in our head of these very sort of like weak, sort of, I don't speak, I'm quiet, I'm afraid. He said that actually a lot of the time these DV victims are tough as nails. And so again, his point was not, I don't want to miscast what he was saying. He was not supporting Amber Heard or anything, and he admits he doesn't know a lot of the case, but do you think that's a legitimate point, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting idea. A lot of times domestic violence victims are very hard people. And part of that is because, as we've talked about at length, it's often a cycle. The reason why people are conditioned to abuse is because they have endured abuse over time, and they have learned and adapted to be able to deal with that. And so, yeah, you don't learn to deal with being hit and being, pulled down and degraded and all of these types of things without developing pretty thick emotional armor. As far as the behaviors she's exhibiting, I think that just goes a little bit into the problem we have with the complexity of abusive relationships. Our legal system has obviously defaulted towards the side of one that we are going to hold legally responsible is the one who is aggressive. We're going to assume that the person who is initiating the conflict is the one who has the greatest power to be able to not do that, and should bear the most responsibility for that. But I think what you see then with, lots of conversations now about reactive abuse and bilateral violence and all of that type of thing. They just make it clear that the reality of abusive relationships are not so black and white. Having said that, I think it's pretty easy most of the time, and certainly in this case, when you listen to the audios, to recognize the patterns. Right. If you're looking for, very simply put, if you're looking for who is the abuser in the violent relationship, you're typically looking at the one who is asserting control. Which one is asserting control over the other one? And there's just such a stronger record of that in Amber's conduct, than there is of Johnny's, who moved in all of her friends, next door and let her visit her family, all that stuff.
And lest anyone think here that I was trying to make an excuse for Amber Heard or imply that I thought it was an equivocal thing. I really don't. In this case, actually, Depp, I understand the argument that there might have been times when Depp, especially if he was drunk or whatever, said some things that were, quote, emotionally abusive. But I don't believe that this is how this man is when he is not driven to that by Amber Heard's real abuse, like the physical abuse. And it sounds like her relentless instigation of emotional abuse. And when we have her on those tapes, those recordings, so many recordings now, saying, you always want to run away, you always want to split, and I want to fight. it's very clear who the passive one is in that and who the aggressive one is. So, again, not trying to muddy the waters, because I've been exasperated with people who see this as an equivocal thing. They're both toxic, because that's not the case. But I did think it was an interesting point he raised about the stereotype that we have about DV victims. And I have to say that, that goes both ways. Like Johnny Depp, there are a number of people who prefer to think of him as like a cuddly teddy bear. And we should be realistic. And so we hear sometimes on Amber Heard's recordings that she played in court, he's screaming at her, he's calling her a cunt and stuff. Well, again, he's a domestic violence victim. And like the guy said, they can be tough. So anyway.
Well, I'm looking back through my notes here, because I was trying to remember what exactly it was that Dr. Anderson said that had really drawn kind of a bright line for me under this. But she basically said something to the effect of, I considered it mutually abusive because I saw both of them employing conflict against each other. And to me, that's like saying, just take, this is going to be a terrible example and you're going to hate it, but let's just take the war in Ukraine, where you do seem to have a pretty obvious aggressor. One is invading the other and using the missiles and stuff like that. The other one is, sitting in their own territory doing things. The fact that both of them are employing violence does not mean that Ukraine is somehow now the aggressor. Russia is still the aggressor here. Violence is a tool. Conflict is a tool. Abuse is a purpose-driven use of that tool, is kind of how I see it. And so there's been a lot of muddying the waters in the conversation and in the commentary by wanting to turn this idea that Johnny said bad things to Amber into abuse rather than simply being conflict. I think that's a fairly common sense situation. If somebody is coming at you, you do get to defend yourself. It doesn't make you, an aggressor.
Right.
So that's just the piece that I think is missing in a lot of that conversation, is the fact that at least how we conceive of abusive relationships and their dynamics at this point, the key is really who is the aggressor.
Right. What, how damaging is the turd thing? Like to the jury, like hearing that she shat on his bed, like,
it's dramatic, it's not punching him. You can maybe wonder if the jury takes it a little bit less seriously for that reason. I think the main thing is really just the ego blow that's landed on Amber.
She's getting horrible cover. I mean, and what's interesting is that, of all things, which I guess I kind of understand, because it's pretty dramatic, shitting on your husband's bed, but that is getting so much traction in the media this time around, and I'm seeing lots of blue check marks online, commenting on it. So anyway, it's certainly not good. It's not good for your PR if your persona as an actress is, as she's complained before, is mostly relegated to your physical sexiness, and your allure. It's not good for now people, when they see you, their first thought to be like straining over, your husband's over your marital bed. Yeah. But anyway, so I really appreciate you being here again and to talking about the Depp stuff. And we'll be back a week from now, next Friday. We're gonna do another recap, and hopefully at that point Amber will have testified and we can can unpack all of that. So
still anyway, a lot of ride left.
Gosh. So I've got Andrea Burkhart here to discuss Evan Rachel Wood's official response to Marilyn Manson's defamation lawsuit. And she just filed a response, a legal document this morning. So Andrea, anything you jump out at you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, well, so what Evan Rachel Wood has done is she has responded to the complaint with an anti-SLAPP motion. And we have talked about anti-SLAPP, of course, in the context of the Johnny Depp case, because we've compared the requirements and processes for anti-SLAPP in Virginia, where they're very permissive, compared to California, which is the first state that adopted an anti-SLAPP statute and has a very strict rule to have to be able to comply with at an early stage in the process for the case to be able to go forward. So the way that works in California is, if you believe that somebody's lawsuit against you is predicated on basically punishing you for engaging in activity that's protected under the First Amendment, what you get to do is you get to file one of these anti-SLAPP motions. They ask the court to basically strike any allegations that relate to you engaging in First Amendment activity, strike any cause of action that is predicated on you engaging in any First Amendment activity. This all happens without any discovery. Discovery is stayed while these motions are litigated. So there's no opportunity for him to go out and do any more investigation to support his allegations beyond what he's already done. And then there's also provisions for attorney fees to be awarded, depending on the outcome of the motion. So it's not really an unexpected move in this case, even though only one of the specific claims does in fact deal with defamation. Much of his argument for what constitutes extreme and outrageous conduct by Ilmagor and Evan Rachel Wood are based on things that they have said to others. The false FBI letter, the coordinating with all of the other accusers, those types of things, the statements made in connection with Phoenix Rising, and the meetings that they showed with all the accusers on that documentary. So it's not surprising to me that this is the response, because it is such an extremely powerful tool in the state of California.
Now, I noticed so she filed the anti-SLAPP thing, and then also there was a different document that she filed, right? Was that just a general response?
She's filed, she did file, I think, 3 documents. They are fairly voluminous. I'm still going through quite a bit of them at this point. So she filed the actual motion. She filed her own declaration supporting the motion. And then I believe she filed another essentially declaration to put forth other evidence. And so basically what's happening is she is disputing the allegations. She is stating unequivocally that she did not falsify. She didn't do the false FBI letter. She believed it was authentic when she filed it. She hasn't made up any abuse allegations. Everything that she said has, been true and honest and a sincere belief to, make public policy changes. So the challenge at the anti-SLAPP stage is that Marilyn Manson is going to be required to make what's called a prima facie case. Prima facie case basically means he has to be able to present sufficient evidence that a jury would be able to make a conclusion about every one of the elements of his claims. And this is, a fairly difficult burden to be able to meet when you have no opportunity to engage in any discovery, because a lot of times some of the evidence that you come up with, for example, with like people's mental state and why were they doing this and what was going on in the background, those things you aren't going to be able to prove them until you're able to get into discovery. So we do have to assume that Manson's lawyers knew that this was going to be coming. I noticed in his complaint, often lawyers will plead things using this language that says, upon information and belief, such and such is the case. And basically what that's saying is, we can't prove it right now, but we think we will be able to prove it. And so what you notice in his complaint is that when he talks about things like the FBI officer, confirmed she didn't write it, these are not on information and belief. He's stating them as these are facts. And so we may be able to infer from that maybe he's already got a statement from this FBI officer. He's already got a declaration, something to that effect. It sounds at the very least that he's already talked to them and confirmed what he's alleged in his complaint. So I do expect that they have prepared for this already. They knew that this would be coming, just given the nature of the allegations. So we'll have to see what he responds with.
The last thing I want to ask you about that. So Evan Rachel Wood, as you said, she states that she believed that that the forged FBI letter was legitimate when she received it.
Yes.
Okay, now we know that letter did not come from the FBI because it's forged. Whoever made it, they did put a real FBI agent's name on it, but we know that it's not real. That the letter is fake. So my question would be: is that an implicit way of saying that she's going to turn on Ilma, or is she going to say that a stork just dropped this on her desk, or what? What does that mean?
Well, that is a great question. She did, from what I saw in her declaration, take some care to say that she believed it was authentic. She's not representing that it is, in fact, actually authentic. She's just saying she believed that it was. We know from the text messages that Marilyn Manson attached to his complaint that apparently it looks like she and Ilma drafted this thing together, yep. Came up with the specific language themselves. We can assume that Evan Rachel Wood is probably going to dispute the authenticity of those texts as well. But that's at this point, that's not really going to be an issue. The prima facie case just means I can present the evidence, and if the jury believed it, they would side with me. It's not going to consider, does she dispute it? What weight should it be given, that type of thing. So the text message alone is likely going to be enough to get him over that hurdle of I didn't falsify an FBI letter.
Sorry. So why make that claim? Because she literally has nothing else, I guess, that she can do, or is she going to turn on Ilma later, or even despite the evidence that he has? I don't.
Well, she has to combat that somehow, because it's just so incredibly damaging to her credibility. And so the problem is that from an anti-SLAPP standpoint, some of her other claims, at least on first glance to me, do appear to be fairly strong. Like, yes, normally when you go and testify in front of Congress, those types of statements are privileged. And they, it's part of your First Amendment right to petition the government and things like that. Talking to other people about your experiences, if they're true, are, likewise, it's protected First Amendment activity. So the problem is for him to be able to present his prima facie case that what she did was not true and was actually extreme and outrageous. It's going to put him in the position of having to make the case, that these weren't true, right. Which again is it's a very big burden for him to come up with at this particular stage of where they're at in the proceeding. It's hard to prove a negative in any event. How do you prove over a 4-year relationship that something never happened? It's very, very difficult. So that part of it, I think, is probably the hardest thing that he faces. But her credibility is really critical to that. And so if her credibility falls on the sword of this falsified FBI letter, it does potentially shift the dynamic a little bit in his favor on the rest of it.
Her attorney, you and I were talking about this. Her attorney is Sean Hawley, and Sean Hawley was a protege of Johnny Cochran, who was the famous "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit" lead attorney on the O.J. Simpson case. And Sean actually sort of made her bones, so to speak, as they say in the mob, on the O.J. Simpson case. And it was one of her first trials with Johnny Cochran, certainly her first big one. So it's kind of interesting. I've been talking about the OJ trial off and on this, and it's kind of interesting to see this. some things coming around here. She was also Lindsay Lohan's attorney and has represented some other people. She's a big entertainment lawyer, right, Andrea?
Yeah, she is. So interestingly, she herself is not the one who has signed these documents. So somebody else in the firm did that, but it is her firm. Yes, she was one of OJ's defense lawyers. She was a late add to the team, as I remember. Has had a, like you said, a fairly extensive entertainment career since then. My perspective on Sean Hawley, at least from what I know, is that she does seem to be a good attorney. I think it probably was a good choice by Evan to go for somebody with that type of experience. I mean, God, if you look at, when you just look at the results they got for OJ, you got to recognize the quality of the lawyering that went into that. So yeah, that's going to be it's going to be an interesting battle between two very prominent folks in the LA legal industry. Yes, Clash of the Titans from a legal standpoint, for sure.
Yeah, because Howard King and his firm, they've represented Apple Music and like Sony and stuff. Anyway, well, Andrea, I know it's been a very long week, and we just spent an hour talking about the Depp Heard stuff. So I'm going to let you go on this, but I appreciate again your insight, and we'll be coming back to Andrea as this case develops and talking more about things. If you enjoyed this, I always appreciate donations, contribution tips. The links to my PayPal and Patreon are below, and you don't need a membership to PayPal to tip. Subscribe to my channel, ring the bell. Andrea does not have a YouTube channel, much to my dismay and others, but she doesn't have a YouTube channel, but you can see her on Legal Bites and Rakita Law during the week, and find her on Twitter. And yeah, thanks so much, Andrea.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.